listening to the Ringside Renaissance Wrestling Podcast.
Welcome back to the Ringside Renaissance. This is episode 10, and we're talking about factions today and some favorite matches. I'm here with Jesse and Kevin. How you guys doing today?
Just peachy.
Yeah, I feel like we're the strongest faction in pro wrestling today, so I'm excited to get into some.
The strongest faction in the podcast world.
Don't know about that, but we're trying to get there.
We're on our
way. We're up and coming. Yeah, so there's so many factions out there throughout the history of wrestling that have been great and made wrestling great and gone on to make bigger stars.
I think a good faction helps extend a story. I love factions. I like factions more than I like singles competitors.
Yeah, it's when done right, like Kevin said, it can elevate a story. It can elevate an up-and-coming star, putting a star with established veterans and having him come out and break out from the group as an up-and-coming star. Factions can also be that they're formed to put a babyface over, like a heel faction trying to take down a babyface, or vice versa. So factions are a lot of fun as long as they're done right.
Yeah, because we've gotten a lot of like good and bad factions over the years. Some really cool and dominant, and some kind of just comical and like, what is happening? Like, why is this even made? Like, who thought of this? Like, you had like the Riot Squad, which Vince McMahon kind of made off of. He clearly watched the Suicide Squad movie and was like, I need a Joker and I need this and that. And it's just like, this is stupid. But did it help build and make some actual wrestlers and give them a stage and a spotlight to show their abilities and turn them to bigger stars like Liv Morgan and later Ruby Soho? So, yeah.
I truly think that the Riot Squad helped elevate Liv more than it did the other two.
Yeah.
I think there's one faction that I remember scratching my head at, and Retribution.
Factions are so great, and there's one of my biggest favorite factions was from the late 90s, was the reformed Hart Foundation, led by Bret Hart, with when he reunited with his brother Owen and Davey Boy Smith, the British Bulldog, and Jim the Anvil Neidhart. And the loose cannon, Brian Pillman, became like an honorary member. What Bret Hart and the Hart Foundation did with that faction was something that I've never seen before, is that anytime they did a show in America, they got booed out of the building. But anytime they did a show in Canada, they were the biggest baby face in the company. And it was so cool to see that parody. And it made you want to, usually I watch a Raw or a SmackDown or a Dynamite, and I don't really pay attention to where they are, like the venue that they're at or the city that they're at. I kind of, unless like there's a hometown wrestler there, I don't really pay attention to. But back in the 90s when that happened, I paid attention to where they were because I wanted to see what the crowd was going to be like with the Hart Foundation. And they held almost all the gold at one time. I've talked before about how much I love Owen Hart and think he's one of the most underrated wrestlers of all time. And to have the loose cannon Brian Pillman just be there by like proxy, just he trained in the Hart Dungeon, so I'm just going to be with you guys. And he added so much character to that group, because they kind of needed like a comic relief guy, and the other four guys were trying to be serious, brooding heels. So to have the loose cannon there really just added to that.
Yeah, the Hart Foundation was great. Training in the dungeon and their feuds and their championships go down probably is, in my opinion, the greatest faction, arguably.
Yeah, Hart Foundation was the people feuding with DX so much. And DX was built originally as a heel group, but everybody turned them babyface because they hated the Hart Foundation so much. And the real life animosity between Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels, it showed right through the screen. And
Oh,
shout
yeah.
out to their professionalism for being able to put their personal differences aside and put on so many good matches in the ring.
That's another faction I would put up there with the Hart Foundation. Was from the early 2000s to mid 2000s. I'm, of course, talking about Evolution.
Mm.
You had Ric Flair, Randy Orton, Batista, and Triple H. While that group was clearly designed to help elevate the young talent of Batista and Randy Orton, you had these moments where all of them had gold. Triple H was the world champion, Flair and Batista were the tag champions,
Yeah.
and then Orton was the Intercontinental champion.
Mm-hmm.
Like, everybody just had gold. And I like even in current day, you see factions trying to accomplish that, and I think that just helps elevate the faction as a whole when you have gold on every member and making them look like they are running the show. And Evolution did just that, and they had great moments, including the thumbs up, thumbs down to Randy, and then the thumbs up, thumbs down when Batista turned on Triple H. I think like you had enough stories just with those members of that faction that you didn't really need to go outside of the faction, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Yeah, a group that was designed with these veterans to bring in these younger guys that were up and coming and put them over and make some more storylines out of them, and then turn them into being the big stars that they are and were.
Yeah, it's interesting that Batista wasn't originally supposed to be the fourth member. It was supposed to be like Mark Jindrak or some shit. Like, you can look online, like when they're opening vignettes of them like walking away from a limo or a plane or something. Like originally they had like, I think it was Mark Jindrak. I might be wrong, but they had him originally in the group, and then they took him out and then put Batista in and reshot all of those shots or whatever. Yeah.
Wow.
I think it was Mark Jindrak. I don't really remember, but yeah, what a way. I mean, like Kevin said, in the 2000s, two of the biggest stars from the 2000s were Randy Orton and Batista. And I think being in that faction helped elevate their credibility, being with Ric Flair, who his resume speaks for itself, and Triple H, who also, just became a dominant force in pro wrestling.
Two of guys that were in great big factions before that, too. Yeah.
Mark Jindrak was initially supposed to be part of Evolution, but was replaced by Batista due to concerns about his maturity and influence on Randy Orton.
Yes, sir. I know a thing or two. He was in the late WCW when WCW folded and then came under Vince McMahon and under WWF. He got introduced during the whole invasion thing. And he was in WCW towards their later years.
Right. So speaking on WCW, we got to talk about the NWO, of course.
Yes.
So many different parts of the NWO, because you had the Wolf Pack and you had the splits and this and that. But, the original NWO, you had Scott Hall, Kevin Nash. Yeah. And then, of course, Hollywood Hogan turning over, becoming heel at that point. You had Syxx. And, then you had them feuding with Sting, and then they turned into the Wolf Pack, and even to when it became the WWE and WCW had shut down, and we had this No Way Out pay-per-view, and The Rock getting hit by this 18-wheeler truck, and who's in it but Hollywood Hogan. Yeah, and we have No Way Out, the pay-per-view, NWO, and the feud with Hogan and The Rock and Scott Hall, Kevin Nash, and Stone Cold Steve Austin, and wreaking havoc. They designed the whole pay-per-view for them to show up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Another good faction to talk about would be the faction that had 3 stars from NXT that all elevated to the highest and grandest stage of them all.
It was coming.
I'm talking about Sierra Hotel, India, Echo, Lima, Delta, Shield.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think anybody could deny, looking back at it now, that when the Shield showed up, you didn't really know what to make of them. And, like, you knew all 3 people. You knew Seth as Tyler Black back in his indie days. You didn't really know much about Roman. You didn't really know much about Dean. And looking back at it now, they all 3 of those men are some of the most decorated individuals in wrestling.
Yeah, for sure. And I believe they were brought in to be CM Punk's bodyguards
They
at
were.
first.
They
Yeah.
were.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Which I
which is
feel
crazy.
like that'd be a cool feud now with Seth and Punk. Be like, I made you.
They had a
You
great
know.
handicap match too. The 3 versus CM Punk.
3 versus CM
Yeah.
Punk. Yep.
Yeah.
I'd even put one of the Shield's best matches was against another fantastic faction, the Wyatt family.
Yeah.
They just had so much. I think they were undefeated for like the first year they were in.
They were.
WWE. They went undefeated, and then which I feel like lost some of their credibility when they lost a 3-on-1 to CM Punk. I think that kind of killed them a little bit. But yeah, I mean, everybody when the Shield came out, man, and organically becoming babyface, like being heels at first, and just the crowd just loving them and wanting them to succeed so much, and being a part of the entrance when they came out through the crowd and everything else. Like I think they just organically became over as baby faces, and they were forced to be reckoned with for so long, you know,
wreaking havoc on the WWE.
And they all their talents fed off of each other perfectly. Like when you had Dean and Seth running rampant as tag champions, you believed every time that they had a match they were going to win.
I believe Dean held the United States title for quite a long time when they were a faction. It's a crazy little fact before I move on to my next faction that, do you know each of them won their first world heavyweight title off one of the other ones?
Yeah.
Like
that's true.
Seth cashed in at WrestleMania, pinned Roman Reigns, became the champion. Then Dean cashed in at Money in the Bank and pinned Seth, I believe, for the championship. And then when it was a vacant title and Roman beat Dean for the championship the first time, then that's when Alberto Del Rio came out and cashed in or whatever. But yeah, they each won their first world heavyweight title off one of the other ones. So that's kind of a cool, interesting little factoid.
I still say when Dean cashed in at Money in the Bank, that's probably one of my favorite cash-ins. That's the one night all 3 members of the Shield held the title in the same night.
It was interesting. And I like how even though Moxley's in a different company now and stuff, the influence of the Shield is still being shown even recently at WrestleMania.
Comes through the crowd.
My next faction I talked about before, and one of my favorites, if not my favorite faction in wrestling history, is the Four Horsemen.
Oh, I thought you were going DX.
The Four Horsemen.
Yeah.
The original Four Horsemen, there was a lot of different members throughout the years. The original Four Horsemen, Ric Flair, Tully Blanchard, Ole and Arn Anderson, and J.J. Dillon being their manager. The concept behind them being formed, I think, really was interesting. I don't think, from what I've seen and what I've read, I don't think they were ever supposed to be a faction. What it originally was Ric Flair was the world heavyweight champion, Tully was the TV champion, I believe, at that time, and Ole and Arn were the tag champions. And they were trying to promote an upcoming event coming up, but they didn't have enough TV time for all 4 of them to have their own spot. So they put all 4 of them out to do a promo together. And during it, Arn Anderson said, "Never in history have you ever seen such dominance between 4 people. You have to go back to the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse." And he put his 4 fingers up and he said, "The 4 horsemen of the apocalypse." And it was just him doing a promo, but it caught fire. And it became something way more than that. And talk about a dominant faction in history. I mean, they formed holding all the gold. They just took over the NWA and they were heels, but everybody wanted to see them. If you didn't like them, you wanted to see somebody beat them. And that was just all it was to it. There wasn't people that were indifferent to them. Either you love the Four Horsemen or you just wanted to see them get their asses beat. And that's a definition of a good wrestler and a good faction as far as I'm concerned. I mean, there was different iterations. Ole left, Lex Luger joined. They had Barry Windham was Four Horsemen for a while. They had Sting was in it for a while, Brian Pillman, Chris Benoit, the different iterations of the Four Horsemen throughout the years went on and different members came and went. Mongo, I think, was a member of them for a while. But yeah, the original Four Horsemen, to me, I could sit and watch just Four Horsemen promos or just them individually or them together all day long. It just, everything about them was just larger than life, and they all bought into the roles. Ole and Arn were the big bruising tag team, like the the Southern beat your ass boys. But when they got with Ric Flair and Tully, who were like the high class suits and whatever, Ole and Arn put the suits on, and they were like the high class, we make the money, and it just worked. It just worked so well, and they bought into Ric Flair and Tully's gimmick and just made it part of their own, and very well done. One of my favorites.
They all just really elevated each other and the people they went against, and inspired countless factions and people, and put a lot of butts in seats for sure. Yeah.
What you got, Andy? Let's hear a fact.
But we got like the straight edge society with CM Punk and the cult leader type of stuff, prior to even like Bray Wyatt. And we get these other cult kind of leader things that we've had before CM Punk too, and we've had after, let's face it, in different iterations. But I thought that was cool, beefing with Rey Mysterio and Jeff Hardy too, and it was good. Yeah,
the Jeff Hardy feud was amazing.
Oh
yeah,
everything was there. Everything was there. Jeff Hardy had his drug problems. CM Punk was touting that he was straight edge. It was just there, and they took so advantage of it. And shout out to Jeff being able to pull his personal stuff, which was probably a hard time in his life, and be able to make it work storyline.
Right. I also think about like the Nation of Domination. They were a great faction at the time.
I was going to bring them up in a little. I fucking love the Nation of Domination, man.
Yeah.
Think about who was all in that.
Right.
Literally, just think about every member of the Nation of Domination, and they had great careers before. Some of them were brought in through the Nation of Domination.
Yeah.
I think first and foremost, you got to go with the final boss when you're talking about that.
Right. Yeah. D'Lo Brown.
Yeah. Rocky Maevia's career was going in the toilet till he joined the Nation of Domination,
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think we would have the Rock we have today if it wasn't for that career resurgence joining the Nation of Domination and turning him into a different character completely.
Yeah, they just had like a back and forth with the DOA, Disciples of
Apocalypse. Oh my goodness. And there was oh my god, I can't remember their names, but Savio Vega, he had his group of guys too. I can't remember. Yeah, it was funny. It was interesting, and but Nation of Domination, when they came in, was really pushing some boundaries, and
definitely. Yeah.
And they had their feud with Ahmed Johnson.
Yes.
And Ahmed Johnson was getting beat up by him, and that's when he brought the Legion of Doom in to the Road Warriors to help him in the Chicago street fight at WrestleMania 14. And but man,
don't forget, Savio Vega was in the Nation of Domination.
Yep, originally, correct. Yep.
Yes.
So
and Crush was too.
Crush, Mark Henry. Mark Henry was in the Nation of Domination.
Yes.
But yeah, so Crush and Savio Vega were originally in the Nation of Domination, and when they were let go, they created their own factions, which was DOA and Savio Vega's group. I can't remember what it was called, but
yeah. And you remember the Right to Censor, the RTC, with Steven Richards and Val Venus.
Bull
Savio
Buchanan.
Vega's group.
Yeah.
Los
Boricuas, yeah. Boricuas. Nailed it. But yeah, the right to censor, man. Like you said, Val Venus, Bull Buchanan, Ivory, when Ivory came out, and their fucking entrance music alone was enough to make you hate them. It was just like a car alarm. Could not stand it. I could not stand it.
And Steven Richards was like the American Psycho character.
Yeah,
almost.
So good. So good.
I think we got to turn the page to current time a little bit and talk about the faction or stable that up until recently was dominating Monday Night Raw. Of course, talking Judgment Day. Initially, it was the brainchild of Edge.
Yeah.
And when Vince McMahon wanted to take the group in a more supernatural way, Edge voices grievances with that and was hence written out of Judgment Day in substitution for Finn Balor.
Oh, okay.
And from that moment on, the Judgment Day elevated every single person in that faction except for JD. The human bobblehead, he has not had a good time in that group. But look what it's done for Damian Priest. It helped put Damian Priest in the main event scene.
Right.
And now with Damian being World Heavyweight Champion.
Yeah, Judgment Day was good, man. Dom, look at what put Dom over, you know?
Yeah.
Like, he had his feud with his father, Rey Mysterio, but like being in that group and being the little weasel, I was going to say other words, but
Yeah.
you know,
Dirty Dom.
Yeah, help put them over. And that's what factions, if used correctly, they put people over, whether people in their group or otherwise. I got a big one here that's I'm going to talk about for a couple minutes. Is the Heenan family. Bobby Heenan's group. This faction ran for 20 years. It ran through the AWA, the NWA, and the WWF, and other companies as well. But those three big companies, I mean, it had a who's who of members throughout. I'm going to focus on the WWF one because there's just, throughout the other companies, there was just way too many people that were in it.
Right.
But you talk about some WWF members that were in it. Andre the Giant.
Yes.
The adorable Adrian Adonis. Well, it was just Adrian Adonis. When he was adorable, he went with Jimmy Hart. But the Barbarian, Big John Studd, the Brainbusters, who is Tully Blanchard and Arn Anderson. The Brooklyn Brawler. Who cares about him? He's my favorite jobber of all time.
Yeah.
The Colossal Connection, who was Haku and Andre the Giant as a tag team. Harley Race, Hercules, the Islanders, who was Haku and Tama. King Kong Bundy, Mr. Perfect was a part of the Heenan family. Ric Flair was a part of the Heenan family. Rick Rude was a part of the Heenan family. Mr. Wonderful Paul Orndorff, like just a who's who. And they didn't all appear together. They didn't all interact with each other very much, but Bobby Heenan managed everybody, and they could crisscross into everybody's storylines, and everybody knew that if Bobby Heenan was coming out with you, you messed with all the other guys, and you were part of the Heenan family. And like that just ran for so long. And Bobby Heenan was, I'll say, my favorite manager of all time. And for him to come out and people just not like him that much, and then him come out, it just really put over how much they didn't like his faction when they came out.
Yeah. You knew when they came out with him that they weren't good. And he got booed, and he was just annoying. A great manager to run a great faction and recruit people and probably teach them a lot along the way too. Bobby Heenan was also on commentary at points too, just as that annoying commentator that always sided with the bad guys, and he just always wanted to strangle.
Him and
TV.
Him and Gorilla Monsoon commentating together is iconic, man. It's so good. Gorilla Monsoon was like the ever babyface play-by-play, and Bobby Heenan was the ever heel color commentator, and it was such a contrast that it worked very well.
Yeah, I mean, to go to like old days, somewhat, well, late 90s, we had the Ministry of Darkness. At times we had them when the Brood was also a part of them, and then when they also became the Corporate Ministry, I believe it was called.
I forgot about the Corporate Ministry.
When the Ministry of Darkness went corporate with Vince McMahon.
Almost as bad as Corporate Kane.
It was me, Austin. It was me the whole time. Oh my God.
And they abducted or kidnapped Stephanie McMahon, and they had her on the thing, and Undertaker would put his burning Undertaker sign on Vince's lawn, you know.
Yeah.
What the heck? Yeah.
They hung the Big Boss Man at WrestleMania. Like,
I forgot about that.
It was a little bit pushing the envelope, man.
Yeah, for sure. Well, you know, the Ministry of Darkness, they had Viscera too. Top 5.
Yeah. Midian.
Yeah.
Midian was amazing, bro. And then, of course, they had the Acolytes, who became the APA. That was, something. Those two broke out as tag team stars, and obviously JBL Bradshaw, he broke out in a singles career after that. And Ron Simmons had a really big singles career before all that, and he did a lot by helping put Bradshaw over. But man, they were scary though back in the day with all their like little satanic stuff they were doing and stuff. It was very
Yeah.
scary, and it especially when you appeal to like the young crowds and stuff, when you don't realize if this is real or storyline or what it is, and just pushing the envelope of what was there and what wasn't, you know.
Right.
Definitely.
Undertaker was good in pretty much anything he did.
Oh, yeah. But I'd say another solid faction, we've mentioned them a couple times, DX.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
All of DX, not just Shawn and Hunter. But you had X-Pac, the Road Dogg, the Badass Billy Gunn, China. Like I think a lot of the biggest memories of DX go back to the Monday Night Wars. And when they did the whole invasion thing in the Jeep going like down the tunnel. I think that's one of the most iconic faction moments in the history of pro wrestling. Because DX just pushed that envelope every time they were on TV.
Yeah, of course. That's one of them factions that, you know, transcended just wrestling in general. We spoke about it before about being at school and the whole suck it thing. But not only that, but just people having the shirts and the D-Generation X shirts you still see them today, you know, the retro throwbacks. It's just one of those cool things.
I was actually out with my fiance about a week ago, and I seen someone wearing the original, the D-Generation X with the suck it on the back.
Yeah.
And just seeing that made me happy. I'm like, you don't see too much of it anymore, but when you do, it kind of takes you back to that era.
Yeah, you know, and the thing with D-Generation X too is, like you said, it pushed the envelope. It really made the Attitude Era what it was, because I think these guys were just told this to go out and just do you and be you, and they were them for sure. I remember the old videotapes, like they used to have the wrestling videotapes, not just the events, but like the documentaries of the group.
Oh.
And I had the DX one, and like it was just them showing like their greatest moments, but it was like all of them just like hanging out and being goofy together and stuff. And I
uncensored,
remember,
explicit content.
Yeah,
like,
I remember.
And are your parents gonna let you have this?
Yeah, and they were in an audio truck like messing around, and you know, I was watching as a kid and I was like, man, oh man, like they really took over an audio truck. These guys are rebels, you know. And it was cool. I liked the Triple H led with the New Age Outlaws and X-Pac and China version a lot more. I think they were more playful. They were more kind of their thing, you know. But all of them are very good, you know.
Definitely. So, yeah.
Speaking on this, I'm going to go to a backstage faction that was never really supposed to be portrayed on TV, and I'm talking about the Clique, who was Kevin Nash, Shawn Michaels, Triple H, Scott Hall, and Sean Waltman, who ran rampant on the backstage with their influence, and which was cool because it was a faction that the smart fans knew what it was, and it crossed over from during the Monday Night Wars with WCW and WWF. They would put the sign up. Scott Hall and Kevin Nash would put it up when they came out to the ring, and then Shawn Michaels would put it out when he came to the ring in the WWF. And people were like watching it, and they were like, wait a minute, these guys were putting it up over here, these guys were putting it up over there. And it was just kind of like this bond that they grew backstage. And there's a lot of questionable things that happen as far as booking goes with you read into it backstage and whatever, but the Clique was something that like I said, the smart fans knew about it, and they kind of, you know, put their influence, and a lot of them took their influence and turned it into a positive thing towards the end of their career, and helped get other people over and helped the next generation over. And also the cool thing was the curtain call. If you ever hear about the curtain call at Madison Square Garden, and that's when Scott Hall and Kevin Nash were going to WCW, and they had their last house show in WWF. And after the match, Shawn Michaels and Triple H came out to the ring and they all hugged each other, which was weird because Shawn Michaels and Triple H were heels.
They were feuding.
Scott Hall and Kevin Nash were baby faces, and they're all hugging and holding each other's arms up in the ring. And you can see grainy footage of people that brought video cameras into the arena and recorded it. And even though I heard Vince McMahon said that it was okay for them to do it, when the footage got out and they saw the curtain call, you can't punish Kevin Nash and Scott Hall because they're not in the company anymore. You can't punish Shawn Michaels because he's your champion. They punished Triple H for it. Triple H was supposed to be the king of the ring that year.
Yes.
And because of it getting out, whatever, they punished him and had him not win the king of the ring. And that actually catapulted Stone Cold Steve Austin to win the king of the ring that year.
And then we got the iconic
Austin 316 just said, I whipped your ass.
Jake the Snake. Yeah.
Yep. So if the curtain call never happened and Triple H, the footage never got out, Triple H never got punished, we might not have ever gotten Austin 316, which is kind of a crazy turn of events.
Yeah.
So, like, that is still, to this day, 20, 30 years later, still an iconic statement, an iconic promo.
Yeah.
I don't think we'll ever die.
Right.
Yeah, that curtain call was such a infamous moment, and to be only recorded by camcorders and then to go on and have so much influence and shape history so much just from that, and it's just crazy to think.
And look at what we're talking about, like factions, like, you know, every faction we talked about, Evolution, Degeneration X, NWO, the Clique, all these factions had the Four Horsemen all had like members that were in one and then in another, you know?
Yeah.
Like they all crossed over.
All right, now we'll talk about another favorite match of ours that we just want the world to know, and if they haven't seen it, maybe they could go back and watch it now.
Definitely.
I'm going to start off a little bit current era. Not really current era, about 2015, 2016. I talked about it earlier. The Shield versus the Wyatt family.
Okay.
That match catapulted the careers of all 6 people involved. Luke Harper, Eric Rowan, Bray Wyatt, Roman Reigns, Seth Rollins, and Dean Ambrose. All 6 men really know how to work a ring really well. And that was personally one of my favorite matches of the current generation of superstars.
Great match.
Right. Yeah.
And, you know, it's funny, you just took my match because that's the match I was going to pick. From Elimination Chamber 2014 because of... It is what it is because we were talking about factions. I wanted to pick a good faction match. So I'm going to have to go... my match suggestion now, you're going to put me on a spot here. I'm going to go with AEW this time. And I'm going to say Double or Nothing 2019. Cody versus Dustin Rhodes.
Oh my God.
Brother versus brother, the first inaugural event of AEW, the first event after All In, which created AEW. And if you really had no other build other than following some YouTube videos and some social media videos online of Cody calling out Dustin for a match, and it just being the classic brother versus brother, I have to prove to myself that I'm better than you, you know, in the ring. And boy, what they told in the ring was absolutely phenomenal. The whole match, everything about it, the pacing of it, the crowd. Dustin got some good juice during the match. It just kept fighting, just had the will, wouldn't quit. At the end, the moment they shared at the end, Cody went over, you know, the American Nightmare Cody went over and won. And at the end of the match, I believe, I don't know if this is true or not, whatever, I haven't looked into it, but I believe Dustin was going to retire after that match. He wanted that to be his retirement match. And he started taking his boots off to leave them in the ring to signify he was leaving. And Cody grabbed the microphone and said, "No, you're not doing this because I got a match coming up against the Bucks and I don't need a partner. I need my brother." And they embraced, and like, I'm getting like literally getting goosebumps, like as I'm talking about this. And it was just like, wow. Like the way, the story they told in that ring, I think that's probably my favorite match in AEW history.
The emotion involved in that finish.
So good.
Like, that's storytelling, not even storytelling. That's just real life. I want my brother with me.
Yeah.
Brother thing. That was beautiful.
Relatable.
From top to bottom, the chemistry, in the ring, and everybody saw it. And like I said, the build and like not knowing who was going to win. Everybody kind of figured Cody was going to win, but Cody's the type of person that would put his brother over too. So it just, you didn't know. And I love that match. Absolutely amazing match.
Yeah, and me not knowing AEW up until that point when Jesse actually told me to watch that, and I tuned in, and that match just stuck out, and I didn't know the story leading up to it. I know who Dusty was, of course, being Gold Dust, and then Cody of WWE, but what a great match, and the ending, and goosebumps, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree with Jesse. I still think that's the greatest match to have occurred in AEW's history so far.
Yeah, I think it's up there. Definitely top 5 for me, for sure. Favorite. So, we're on the subject of factions, and we spoke about the Hart Foundation, so of course we got to go to In Your House, Canadian Stampede.
Yes.
1997, Calgary, Alberta, Canada. The 10-man tag match between the Hart Foundation of Bret Hart, Jimmy Neidhart, Owen Hart, the British Bulldog, and Brian Pillman versus Stone Cold Steve Austin, the most dangerous man in the world, Ken Shamrock, Goldust, and the Legion of Doom. Man, what a great match it was. Being in Canada, watching it at the time, I knew I was rooting for Stone Cold's team, which is crazy, but when tuning in and watching the pay-per-view, pretty much nobody there was rooting for Stone Cold. It was all Bret Hart. They led up to it almost like a USA versus Canada type of thing, and the promos Bret cut was like, I can't stand you American fans, and why you would root for Stone Cold Steve Austin. Oh, man, what a great match. And Bret was back after 2 months of his knee surgery, I believe, for that match. They had their whole family ringside. They had Stu Hart there.
The little nuances, right? When Bret Hart and the Hart Foundation would come out to the ring and ask everybody to stand for the Canadian national anthem before their matches.
Yes.
And like, holy shit, like you said, in Canada doing that, how over they were with the crowd. Stone Cold was the biggest wrestler in wrestling, no matter what company it was, and getting booed out of the building.
Yeah, Austin sucks.
Yeah,
Austin sucks.
Unbelievable.
The crowd was so loud.
Unbelievable. Yeah. So there you have it, guys. There's some of our favorite factions. Of course, there's plenty of other factions in the history of wrestling, and we would like to hear some of people's favorite factions down in the comments on social media, and give us your suggestions of what our next list of random topics should be. Until next time, I'm Jesse with Andy and Kev.
You're listening to the Ringside Renaissance Wrestling Podcast.
Boom!
Peace.